It's my week 12 review. We're talking about the live final on DraftKings King of the Beach, and we're starting right now. What's going on, everyone? It is a Monday, so that means we're going to walk through normally my 1500 lineup. We're going to do things a little differently, keep it fresh. We're actually going to go through the King of the Beach live final from DraftKings this past week. We do have an awesome guest with us. This is not PSU fans too, but you guys know him, you love him, Ryan Hodge. It's been a while since we did a show together, man. How you doing?
I'm doing good, brother. How you doing, Joe?
Pretty good, man. It's been busy, that's for sure. Good week for me personally. I didn't end up playing the 1500, but had some tournament teams that did really well across the industry. Played a little bit more FanDuel than normal also, but I guess the last week I went through my team on early only, and I think people just care more about the main slate in general. So we're gonna talk a little bit about some of the decisions you made, but also walk through King of the Beach. We'll definitely talk about my boy Nevs. He had 4 seats in this thing. We were kind of sweating his teams live on stream after lock last week as well. But appreciate anyone that's here live. If you're watching this on YouTube later, definitely come hang out with us on stream, twitch.tv/Joe Holka. We go and walk through kind of a review from the week every Monday. Tuesday will be my first look for week 13, but big week with Thanksgiving this week as well. So still trying to piece together what the content schedule is going to look like and whatnot. But anyways, man, yeah, week 12. This was an interesting one for sure. Obviously, I was spending a lot more time kind of on kind of this live final, and there's no late swap, all of that. So a little bit less of that sort of sweat. But 75 people, obviously, it started at 200. Before we fully dive into last week, why don't you tell the people why King of the Beach has a little bit of a special place in your heart for the people that don't know, might be watching this on YouTube later?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, this is like I feel like a guy who was really good in college football and then couldn't hack it in the pros. Me telling this story over and over again.
Yeah, give yourself a pat on the back. Might as well.
But yeah, I ran hot, qualified, and then ran hot again to actually make it into the final. And then you run hot 3 times in a row. It's kind of nice to get up there and get a top 3 finish. So I ended up in second place by like 0.3 points. If you ever want to run bad story, we can have that a different conversation a different time.
Yeah,
But
man,
yeah,
it's the
I mean,
worst. Like I've got tons of stories. Nothing even comes close to as bad of a beat that is, man. That's brutal.
yeah, I mean, I think Manny's bad beat is probably like the number 1 bad beat of all time.
Fair.
Mine definitely comes in up there pretty high. But yeah, dude, these cues, it's so much fun, man. They fly you out. They give you and your significant other your plus 1 resort credit. They're taking you golfing. You're meeting fun people. It's just a 4 paid VIP trip, or I mean, a 4-day all expenses paid VIP trip, man. And it's such a sick sweat. You're sweating with good friends. Like, I mean, back then it was fun. Like I was smoking cigars with Bales. Jay Rayner, Beat by My Jeep, was still around back then, and just like shooting the shit with all those guys. It's definitely a fun time, man. You know,
Yeah,
who can
those
complain?
the best way to get to a live final is to go as a guest, though. Like, we agree on that? Like, like you, at least you don't have to burn a bunch of money getting there.
Yes.
So I went to the hockey final last year with Nevs. Actually, we'll talk about his teams, but we were originally going to be going to King of the Beach as well, but something came up with his kid or something. So I ended up sweating this from home. But let's dive into it. So, and by the way, your second place finish, hashtag how rich, buddy. How much of that have you given back?
All of it.
All of it.
It's all gone back.
All right. So before we get into the first place team, I kind of want to go through as far as his strategy. We talked about him on stream, so we might as well start there. Nevs ended up with a top 10 finish, which was great. It was live to win this, like very live to win this until the Derrick Henry, I guess his 2 touchdowns in 20 seconds or something absurd like that. So that was rough. He had Derrick Henry on his I believe his 9th place team, but this team in 13th was top 5 for most of the afternoon. Did have Zeke and Cowboys, so you had some outs going there, but I guess overall, kind of the original approach, I thought, if you have 4 seats in this, you had the most seats out of anyone. So there's a couple people that had 2 seats. I think one person had 3 as well. I think that the strategy in something like this is trying to have as least amount of overlap as you can. Would you kind of agree with that? And I mean, if you have the chance to cover some game stacks, cover your bases a little bit, I think that your ideal situation is having 3 teams that finish very poorly and then 1 team that wins. Like, is that how you kind of would have approached it too, with multiple seats?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even if you, I don't want to get into it too much as he's a coaching client of yours and
Oh,
whatnot,
do
but it
whatever.
depends on how much it depends on how much you spent to get those 4 seats.
Sure.
Would you run super hot and you
Yep.
qualified with like $400? You know what I mean? Like that would be insane for one of these queues. Or did you spend 15, 16K? So you really have to weigh what you're trying to go for.
Sure.
But yes, in general, I think the rule of thumb here is if you have 3+ seats for one of these things, the only overlap that I would have in 4 would, I mean, maybe 2 of the lineups would have some overlap in them, but I definitely would make sure that I'm unique through and through.
Yeah, I think he ended up with 3 Kamara teams, 2 CMC teams, and I think that was the majority of the overlap. But we'll look at it in a sec. But yeah, I think that's a big part of it, like how much you paid to actually get there. Nev's actually won like 3 seats to like the first step of it in 1 week, literally. Just like I always talk about it in NFL, like you're kind of surviving in tournaments for a while with the way the structures are and like with all the money up top, and you're hoping to win all the money 1 week. And for Nevs, that was, I think it was week 5, something like that. So he basically won all of his seats. He's got 2 seats for the world championships as well in a couple of weeks. So like that guy just like basically all of his equity just came from like, he had an insane week 5 or whatever it was. So at least thankfully he hasn't burned a ton of money to get here. He had 5 seats, got 4 of them through to the actual live final. So obviously super fortunate for him to get those through. Obviously the result would have been a little better, but still pretty nice payday for him. But let's talk a little bit about your week, Hodge. I know I'll go through some of the roster construction stuff in the first place team of King of the Beach, but I want to get a feel for kind of what you did. You sent me this team. Obviously you guys, you have this tournament for TQE, right? Is kind of just a way to get the community involved. I guess talk about that. And
just something that we put on. So that's what I run, or the lineup that you guys are seeing is what I run in all my head-to-heads, 3-mans, 5-mans. I can send you another link for like the 3-max stuff, which are like some Jameis stacks. And I also was on the Elliott Cowboys in the late game there. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think for me, one, I've been pretty vocal about it. I think CMC is still, mispriced, if you will. He's not at a price point where I'm still considering to move away from him. I think he honestly probably ran a little bad for his day. I mean,
tough day.
I don't know. 9 receptions is about what you're getting. We did get the 2 touchdowns, but typically when you're seeing a guy score twice like that, he's probably hitting the bonus on one of them. Mm-hmm. So I just feel like we were a little closer to a 42, 43 point day out of him.
Yeah. That was like, I talk about that a lot too. People were asking me if you could play this guy in like week 5 when he was like 9,300. I was like, yeah, he should be like 12K. So I'll give you permission to play Christian McCaffrey at under 10K. And then people just decided to, talk themselves out of it, I guess, for a while, which still seems bad.
Yeah, I don't have not even looked at the lobby. I don't know what his price is coming up, but I think when he starts to approach the 11.5 is when you really start to have to consider it, because look at what I had to do. Well, I guess I didn't have to do this. I think that they're looking back at this, maybe being a little less results oriented. I think I had a pretty easy 2v2 here in like J-Matt and Odell. I was on Landry. It was Baker and Landry for me all week. Yep. And then I was like, well, maybe I don't have to jam these guys in. So I essentially went down to like a J-Matt and Odell rather than a Landry and like a $5,300 wide receiver or something like that. And I think that was probably my biggest mistake here in this lineup, and then maybe getting sucked into a Phillip Lindsay matchup. But I don't know. I feel like that one for me. At the end of the day, I'm looking at these lineups and I'm trying to say, how can I get the most opportunities? And for me, Jordan Matthews was a guy. There wasn't another wide. It was Ertz, and then it was J-Matt, right? And Ertz was a fantastic play. Ertz was in. So you talk about overlap. Ertz was a guy who I probably would have had overlap in one of those large field ones, just because I think you get him very significantly under owned relative to the field. He's who I played in my 3-max stuff this week.
It was a really hard week though, man, because like there were so many of these plays that we liked, but like when it actually came down to building a team, like this is the kind of thing that you had to do if you wanted to play CMC, if you wanted to play Baker and Odell, like you had to try and, there was value in the New England game, there was value in the Philly game. So like trying to get a piece of like one of those value situations is basically all we had. I guess thankfully we had Derrick Henry at a pretty nice price tag. I haven't played this guy in like 3 years, but we were pretty heavy on Henry, which was good. But someone in the chat was asking, I guess you have plenty to say about Derrick Henry. So were you on him? I guess made me want to throw up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I was on him. Absolutely. He was a guy who I thought at that price point, opportunities relative to their price is something that I'm constantly looking at. Even if we think the matchup might be tough, or even if we think they project for 2.5 less targets than a similar guy who, but maybe isn't going to touch the ball as many times, right? And on DK, we obviously want those receptions. I'm usually willing to throw out 2.5 extra targets if the price mitigates,
Mhm.
right? So, and I feel like at $6,900, he wasn't necessarily overpriced for a guy who legitimately still might rush the ball 22 to 23 times
Yep.
and has all of the touchdown equity. I mean, like, there's nobody else who's coming into the backfield and touching that football at the 1 yard line, and that's, I think, what whoever it was in the chat, Jay Rogers, I was tilting Sunday. I'm like,
Mhm.
are you kidding me? That got called back. Or are you kidding me? They just ran on 1st and goal from the 1 yard line. They threw a pass to
Saw
the
that.
offensive tackle.
Saw
Like,
that.
you were there, man. You had just as big of it. You had a much larger sweat than I did. Like,
Yeah.
we should have legitimately could have had 4 touchdowns out of this guy. At least
Nuts.
3.
And so I just want to show people quickly kind of what we're looking at here. Like, normally this would be a number that I would completely avoid, right? But like, I had him projected for about the same amount of touches as you did, Hodge. Like, I mean, it's really hard to ignore just the volume in general for a guy that was 6,900 on a slate where we just really needed value. So for me, even this red number for receptions, had to kind of just look at it a little bit more objectively. He is a home favorite. It was a good matchup on the ground. Like, again, there's no one that's going to take his touchdowns away. Getting down to 6,900 from someone even in like the Nick Chubb or even like the Fournette range, like that savings like did a lot for you this coming week. And obviously I was prioritizing getting to CMC, and then this Baker stack was something that I was really high on, obviously, which worked out. I guess the part of this whole slate that I think we probably could have seen coming was the Julio Jones thing, right? Because every time this guy's chalk, he just basically fails, right? So I guess where were you on Julio last week? We ended up with only one of our 4 lineups between Nevs and I had a Julio team, so like that fade ended up working out relatively well. But where were you at on Julio? Obviously, it was a great play. It's just like we've seen this for like 3 years in a row. He's never a good chalk play.
Well, is he ever a good play?
I don't know. I haven't played Julio in a long time. I never pay up for wide receiver basically ever. So
Well, so, and I think me and you follow a very similar train of thought. And that's like paying up at wide receiver. Yeah, a 7K Odell, I'm not entirely sure is paying up for wide receiver. Like, yes, it is relative to, I think, what you typically run in your $1,500.
right.
And that's why I was on Landry, right? I was like,
Sure.
Landry's such the obvious play. Like, same matchup, similar projected opportunities, and he's cheaper. Why would I pay for Odell? Well, then I had the salary, so I did it because I honestly, a little bit of it wanted to cover some of the chalk, right? So in all these 3-mans and stuff, I didn't want to differentiate at that wide receiver position because I think you can get left dead. And so, yeah, for Julio, like, I guess I just didn't overthink it. I kind of looked at it and I was like, yeah, I get that Julio is in this fantastic matchup with Tampa Bay, but I'm not paying for that wide receiver to begin with. So I don't worry about it. I don't know. It seems very straightforward to me. If in this season, if you are paying for a wide receiver, you're paying for Michael Thomas, and then that's it.
Right.
Because Michael Thomas is doing stuff that we have not seen from a wide receiver in a very, very long time. And I do think that there is some merit to forcing him in occasionally when he's in a really good matchup, or depending on your contest selection. But he's putting up, his volume is out of control. He gives you the same floor, I think, as a running back, regardless of how you think you can project him. His floor is so good.
It's really true. I mean, now that there's so many question marks with like Zeke and Saquon and even Kamara to some extent. Like, it's basically CMC in a completely different tier. And then Michael Thomas has been extremely consistent. So I originally kind of fought back on the whole Michael Thomas is as safe as a running back thing, but I've kind of changed my tune a little bit on that. So we're definitely aligned on that. Julio ended up being 45% owned in King of the Beach. So at that point, on a week where we're like, salary was so important and there was a lot of really good plays, I guess I don't know if there was a lot of really good plays. It was hard to build lineups with Julio and still play some of these other guys. So like, these are the kind of things you had to do if you played a Julio team. If I got one thing very right that we didn't take advantage of, as far as Chris and I really liked Godwin over Evans, and that was extremely that was a big differentiator in this term. Let's see if Evans was in the leading lineup. He wasn't. So Godwin was actually 4% owned in this. Evans was like 25, I believe. He's probably towards the bottom. Let's see if we can find an Evans team here. But my reasoning, I know like there's narrative because he's 28%. Evans is 28. So big difference in ownership. Obviously, like most of the field got this wrong. I liked Godwin because I thought they were going to see a decent amount of pressure. And I get that the narrative is that, oh, when Jameis is under pressure, they just throw it to Evans. And like, I don't know. To me, that still just doesn't make a lot of sense from data. So I liked Godwin a little bit more. We talked about he was on my stacks video. If anyone's watching this on YouTube, make sure you're watching the stacks video. That thing has been hot. I'll probably get all of them wrong this week. So maybe we take a week off from that video. But yeah, so like I think that the Julio thing made at least a reasonable fade if you were trying to be heavy on Kamara. Like CMC only ended up being 16% in this, which to me is wrong. But you had to make a lot of choices to make something like that work. So the Julio team basically coming back with like Godwin on the other side of it was really hard to do. Like you basically, if you were going to play Matt Ryan and Julio, and I mean, this is a team we got up to Zach Ertz, thankfully, like it was really hard to get Godwin and coming back on the other side. So like roster construction with Julio was tough. Like Matt Ryan was 32%. Like we rarely see quarterbacks even come close to that, right?
Yeah, that to me. So I just sent you a link of my Tampa Bay.
I'll bring it up.
The way that I approached that game, I didn't even consider stacking the Atlanta side of the ball, right? So I'm typically running 3-mans on FanDuel and 4-mans on DraftKings. Mm-hmm. And so when you're talking about doing a 4-man stack in that game, I think you need the cheaper options, especially when you're talking about getting a one of these high price running backs in, or where what I ended up doing was I ended up getting Zach Ertz in those teams, right? So for me, it was pretty straightforward to go along the lines with Jameis for that stack. It's Roto
Hobo. I couldn't find you. Oh, it's probably because you can't scroll down past some of these other ones, right? Or maybe not.
I don't know. That's strange. It should be there. Should just
unless that's the wrong link. Anyway, so what did you end up doing with them? Sorry, I missed that.
Yeah. So I'll just kind of read the lineup off. So I went Winston, Ronald Jones, Phillip Lindsay, Chris Godwin, Josh Gordon. Don't ask me how I got there. Calvin Ridley, Zach Ertz, Elliott, and Cowboys. And that's kind of what I was saying about. I liked that Elliott and Dallas, especially with just some of the weather. Like typically, I'm not looking into the weather, and I'm definitely not fading the weather. Like if I really liked a quarterback or something along those lines. But I do think there is some merit to. Elliott and the Cowboys correlation like that, dude, if they get up by 12, they're just feeding Zeke over and over and over and over again.
I think a mistake that maybe I made, because I liked Dallas quite a bit because they were so cheap, 2,300. I thought they were a nice pivot off of Cincinnati, which was probably the optimal, really cheap defense in my opinion on DraftKings at least. Like Dallas, like I loved that they're pressuring. Like, okay, I might as well just show you guys kind of what I'm looking at here. So Dallas, they're 21,300, but they're also a team like on this slate in particular pressured more than anyone. And then I'm looking at pressure rate over the last 4 weeks as well to see if I can find some big discrepancies here. And Dallas was still pressuring a ton. So I guess I think the big mistake I made is sometimes I look at quarterbacks that struggle under pressure, and on paper Tom Brady does, but he doesn't take like any sacks. Like this guy like refuses to take sacks. So as I'm watching this game, I'm seeing them get a ton of pressure. I assume they had a ton of hurries in this game, but Brady just doesn't take any sacks. He'll throw it away. Like he literally like for whatever reason, his awareness in the pocket is still very strong. So I think that's something that I probably should have put a little bit more weight into. So maybe that was a little bit of a mistake, but having the Dallas Zeke hammer was at least a reasonable way to differentiate, I think, in this one. Steve was talking about in the chat too, and so the FanDuel side of things, like the biggest swing on the entire slate was the Calvin Ridley touchdown, man, because everyone played Calvin Ridley for the most part on FanDuel. And then also Washington defense was like the stone min. So a lot of people played them in cash, so they were 3K on FanDuel. Like, I don't know, I would have had a hard time playing Washington just because they're not a team that really pressures. I guess like you can make an argument for the Jeff Driscoll, like attacking him on that side of things. But I don't know. That was a terrible swing for that. Like Washington gets there with a defensive turnover at the min price. If you don't have them in cash, you're dead pretty much.
Yeah, I definitely think that was pretty brutal at the ownership. And I feel like that's like the 9th time a defense has had such a massive swing this season. I feel like we just constantly saw it with the Patriots, like the first 8 weeks, right?
Yeah.
And then other than that, I just feel like we've seen some pretty massive swings from a DST. But
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like also, can we talk about the Ronald, like, was I a little stoned Sunday morning to consider Ronald Jones as part of game stacks?
I think so.
Okay, cool.
I don't
All
know.
right.
I mean, I have weird biases towards Ronald Jones because of that random 9 catch game he had when he was chalk, and I guess I wasn't going to play him because he hadn't had more than like 3 catches, I don't think, since high school or something
His
absurd like
career,
that.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so like I don't know. So he was 4,800. I had him projected for 15 touches, 2 catches through the air. Yeah, I guess like on this type of slate, like you like what really helped you in roster construction was finding one of these cheap running backs. So like, did I like Philip Lindsay? Absolutely not. But it was necessary to build some of these
Right.
teams that we wanted. Same thing with Miles Sanders. So like, I hate that. Like, I would more often than not love to get up to someone who I need at least the thing was going to see volume. Someone like Bell at 6,400, or getting up a little bit to someone like Fournette, obviously, who was like had massive touchdown progression coming his way. So yeah, of course I didn't want to play these guys, but the context of the slate, it was like we really had to get down to at least one cheap running back if we wanted to get the Julio teams in, or even the OBJ team. So yeah, dude, like Ronald Jones at 4,800, he can't be that much worse than Miles Sanders and Lindsay, the guys I liked. So they're basically right around the same spot. What was your, so basically trying to get access to that game as a bring back, you said? That's why you got on him?
On who?
On Ronald Jones?
Well, yeah. So like, well, I stacked the Tampa Bay side.
Got it.
That was my 3 of the 4. Calvin was my Atlanta side.
Okay.
And I went with Chris Godwin. I made the exact same team and did one with Godwin, one with Evans. It literally in the exact same 3 max, and then went from there. Well, yeah, because it's like they're $100 difference. I have the sal cap. I really like the way this team's working out. And had it been a massive swing for me, like it, I feel like, you're flipping a coin, man. Every week you're flipping a coin with those two.
I've never heard anyone talk about doing that, but if you did that the whole year, just like played 3 maxes and you played a Jameis team, one with Godwin, one with Evans, you'd be rich.
Yeah.
You basically eliminate one of your teams automatically, but you would for sure be rich.
I'm not entirely sure it's like plus EV, but like,
oh, it's 100% not plus EV, but it's something that would have worked for sure. So let's walk through a couple more of like his decisions, and then we'll look at the team that won it. So this Russell Wilson team obviously just completely misses Hollister in the end zone. Hollister was the cheaper guy for Seattle that I was kind of on, but you mentioned Josh Gordon. So what was the thought process there? Is like, we need cheap wide receivers. We like this game. Like, was that pretty much it?
That was literally it. And then I'm always trying to find a way to bring it back. And so in my Gordon lineup, I had Ertz.
Got it.
And so I'm just trying to find correlation anywhere I can.
Ertz was an awesome play, man. He was like another guy that was like really hard to get to, but like if you got like, he had what? Like he had an insane amount of targets in this game, didn't he?
12 catches, like 15
12
targets.
catches.
Stupid. Yeah.
Yeah. Like let's show people too, because one of the things I like to look at is who at least saw air yards in the past week. McLaurin, 210 air yards leading the way. Chris Conley, would have loved to have seen him realize a few of these, because that was like Nev's big differentiator on that Henry team. So as soon as the Henry team was in the top 10, if Conley catches like really, I don't know, any of this, basically, we would have probably jumped up into the top 5, which, as you know, in a live final, the difference of 9th place, so that specific lineup in 9th place, by the way, finishing outside of a tier is the worst in these things. So 9th gets 20K, 8th gets 30K, and he was outside of 8th place by less than a point. So basically, some of these air yards would have been really helpful. But the difference between like a 5th place finish, 5th place is 50K, 3rd place is 100. And basically it was super tight up here. So yeah, these differentiator yards from Chris Conley would have been extremely helpful for Nev. So that's brutal. Outside of that, Jarvis Landry with 158 air yards. Talked about him, I think, on every single show. Both of those guys. I want to get your take on this, though. So when you're more of a larger field guy these days, which I think is always super, I think we're playing 2 completely different games, by the way. I like the idea of double stacking these guys that aren't going to run as much. I think the single stack guys are more or less the guys that can get there on the ground as well. Is that typically how you approach it? Because I assume like Landry and OBJ had to have been a priority for double stacks with Mayfield, right?
Yeah, and then to me, there was an easy way to run it back with Parker, right? So it's super straightforward.
Or Gesicki, my boy.
Or Gesicki, which, oh my gosh, Vance Donald. Anyways, but yeah, I think on FanDuel specifically, the $1 and the $3, 150 max is where I spend most of my time and focus. And I think it's just, like I'll use Lamar as an example. I'm running Lamar either with Marquise
Yep.
or with Mark Andrews,
and that's it.
But I'm not running them together as three.
Yep.
It's not happening for me.
Perfect. I'm glad that we're kind of aligned on that. It's something that I like. I still, it feels, it's scary to play these too expensive or at least more expensive wide receivers, but I don't think Baker gets there unless both those guys have at least a decent game. So
agreed.
Yeah. So as far as some guys that kind of stood out on this, like obviously the Godwins are here. Devontae Parker had a lot of air yards again. God, Chris Conley, like he's going to be in the buy low model again this week after a week like that. So that's frustrating. Ted Ginn, 160 air yards, only 2 catches. Cortland Sutton, a ton of air yards, only 1 catch on 8 targets. So that was pretty crazy. And then there's these Seattle guys.
That's the Tre'Davious White effect, right?
Well, yeah, it's not like he was owned or anything like that.
Right.
Where's our boy Evans on this? Pretty far down. So he had 8 targets for 4 catches and 50 yards. Like, how does a guy go off for 40? And then Evans basically he's basically the chalk, just does nothing. It's just like insane. I love your strategy. I might do that the rest of the year. Just make one, just throw it in the Millie. Just play a Winston team, one the exact same team with Evans, one the exact same team with Godwin. That's the play. All right. So yeah, I mentioned he was on this Russ stack, which I thought was good. It was kind of a path to get to CMC if you just kind of paid down to a guy like N'Keal Harry, who I thought was clearly the best punt option, like all the way punt option, like a min price nearly option. So I guess, how did you approach these really cheap wide receivers like the N'Keal Harrys? Obviously there was I forget the other New England guy's game, but he was stone min. Tim Patrick, who was banged up the whole week and just a horrendous game environment. Like, you had to at least consider some of these guys. I guess Gage was a little bit more expensive, but get access to that higher total game. So what did you do at cheap wide receiver this week? I think Chris ended up just spreading shares around for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, in that contest with having 4 entries, I think spreading those shares around, because look, the odds of 2 of them even 4xing are so minimal. So I think trying to get one there, but yeah, for me, like those cheap wide receivers, like early on in the week, it was Parker and Landry, and I wasn't really moving away from it, right? Like my Thursday night and my Friday. So I do that show Friday night with Proctor. That's pretty much the first time that I look at the slate. Is literally I fire that up and we go game by game by game. And so I was right there. I was like, yep, Parker and Landry, this makes perfect sense. And then I didn't know what to do with that second or that third wide receiver spot. And at first I wasn't actually considering punting. And then we got a lot of different stuff with Sanu, with N'Keal Harry, with Jacoby Myers, and then J-Mac came in. And then so like that moved me away from Miles Sanders in general, right? And I was just like, okay, I don't need to play Sanders. And then I was like, what do I do about White? And then eventually I was like, I think I land on Jordan Matthews. I think this is the best game environment. He saw 6 or 7 targets the week before. I think I can reasonably project him for about 4.5 to 5 targets. And at his price tag, that's something that I'm willing to literally take, 2x out of this guy and probably be just fine because I'm using Christian McCaffrey. It's a different story if I play Kamara, right? Jordan Matthews isn't even in my lineup. It's not.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like, did he even end up getting a target in this game? I'm just looking at it. Looks like JJ Arceo Whiteside had 5 targets in this one, kind of out of nowhere. Dallas Goedert was so, like, when the whole thing happened with Philly, like I thought that Goddard, they just run more 2 tight end sets again. So it was kind of a weird. I mean, I don't think it was wrong to go with any of those guys. Like, that was clearly a spot where there was going to be more volume. So interesting way to kind of attack roster construction was to fade some of these higher priced wide receivers. So this lineup was one that I thought was really well constructed by Nevs. He ended up going with Ryan Fitzpatrick, again, like a game that everyone loves, but basically just the other side of it in a pretty condensed target share. So Fitzpatrick, Parker, Gesicki bringing it back. It looks like he didn't have anyone on the Cleveland side of this, so obviously he just didn't have the salary for it after he went to Kamara, McCaffrey, and Derrick Henry, so jamming in some running backs. So yeah, it's a decent amount of I guess salary.
This looks
with
like
that.
your lineup. This is your lineup in the $1,500. I guarantee it. If you
probably pretty close. This is like typically what I do. I guess take shots on these really cheap wide receivers, but I don't know. I one thing that I think is a really good way, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, as I know you're kind of in the MME streets, but like one thing that I'm trying to prioritize in stacks is going with 3-man stacks, bring one guy back, but also like a little mini stack in here that makes some sense. So in this one, Derrick Henry and then Chris Conley. So if we like that game a decent amount, grab one side of the game script with Derrick Henry, and then hopefully the other side's throwing a decent amount with someone like Chris Conley. So like, is that the type of things you're like thinking about when you're making groups?
Absolutely. And it doesn't even have to be game script dependent.
Okay.
You could just like the environment, right?
Yep.
So, I mean, you could, I like Henry and Fournette both went off, and that wasn't necessarily a game script thing. That was
That's
just
true.
Fournette catching 9 passes. Like, good for him.
He was smashing when they were down like 30.
Yeah. And that's what I was talking about in that Winston stack. When I played Ertz, I was like, well, where do I run this back from? I was like, oh shit, it's Josh Gordon. That's my cheap wide receiver. And I was like, cool, maybe I'll be the first guy right on Josh Gordon in Seattle, and he goes for 7 and 2.
Why
you
not?
know, like, I don't know, man.
Yeah. That's I don't know. Regardless, I've just seen some of the best tournament players. I think that's something they're doing right now is they're doing their typical three-man stack, bring one back if it makes sense, but then also like a little mini stack in there as well. So it limits like the decision making you have to make, and also I guess really correlates if you're trying to get access to some of these games. So I think this is a really well constructed team by him. We talked about the Baker team. Obviously, there just wasn't a ton of salary after that, but he kind of made it. I think this probably would have been a team I would be more likely to play. So Baker, OBJ, Landry brought it back with a cheap tight end, and Gesicki, who obviously got there with a touchdown, not a ton of yardage there. But then Kamara and Zeke Cowboys, nice correlation there, nice hammer in a tournament like this where there just wasn't a lot in the later games outside of those wide receivers. And then Kamara, who's just the absolute chalk. Philip Lindsay, I guess, like I said, pick your poison with these cheaper running backs that were just like kind of necessary to build some of these type of teams. And then Gabriel was a guy that obviously all the production went to Allen Robinson, but I thought Gabriel was at least in a decent spot at his price, 4,200. I think he was still like top 15 in weighted opportunity rating, something like that. So he ran pretty bad on that, but I like this team quite a bit as well. The Baker side is pretty much what you needed to do super well if you didn't have Godwin, obviously. But I think that was pretty much it for his teams. He had a Matt Ryan stack in here as well, which we talked about, but that was his Ertz one. So let's talk about the winner. What is it? How do you say this guy's name? Is Brontosaurus Flex?
Brontosaurus Flex. Yeah.
That's an awesome name, by the way. Good for this guy. I saw his tweet actually too. He tweeted
He's been around for a minute. He knows what he's doing.
He's got some big hits, I think, too. I always see him on Twitter. So this guy obviously knows what he's doing. So he went with a Baker Kareem Hunt stack and OBJ, brought it back with Parker. So obviously, if you played Hunt, like I get that his price, like, and he basically got there because of that touchdown. I thought he was thin at 5,600, but in this stack, like he didn't have, like somehow the winner did not have Jarvis Landry or Godwin, which is crazy. And he had Kamara. But he went double tight end, which is something I literally never do. But obviously gets 27 from Ertz was huge. Redskins D at 1%. So like, I think one thing that I almost always try and do as well in these smaller field tournaments is really try and leverage defense. So like Cincinnati was just piled on in this tournament. I think they were over 25% owned. Another cheap defense. Again, not a one that I was really on. I know a lot of people played them on FanDuel. Wow, they were 3K on DraftKings. So they were like probably not a great price either. But a 1% defense getting you 21. I guess that's how you win these things, right?
Yeah. I mean, I even remember like, I think the FFWC last year, Atlanta, I think that they ended up having like a 28-point day. And yeah, I mean, even, going way back, I remember I had a defense that scored 16 points on that slate, and like, so that was good. It's hard to, when you have a defense with 4 points and you're getting, averages of anywhere between 9 and 15 to really make up that ground.
For sure.
It's so weird that he doesn't have Godwin or Landry.
Well, he got like, Boyd at 1%. I mean, so let's take this for. I mean, it's a 75-person tournament.
Give me a like.
How many times have we played? Like probably even you and I both. How many times have we played this guy and he hasn't gotten there, and then he's 1% owned and does it? Yeah. So Julio though, like that's the thing. So like we talked about this on stream too. Like Julio, obviously when he's chalk, he's just not going to do anything per usual. But then like the next week, he's just going to go nuclear. But like the problem is the next week, and I haven't even looked at the schedule. The game that he goes nuclear is like not even on the main slate usually. So like you get
Thursday night.
It's like the Amari Cooper thing. Like when Amari Cooper is popular, it's always bad. But then he's like 1% owned on like a Thursday slate, and he just goes completely nuts. Doesn't help anyone. So like that's probably what'll happen with Julio. I said, I haven't looked at the schedule, but.
Totally off topic. Did you see Pete? He was like top 5 in the Lux box the other day. Yeah, but with no Amari. It
Come
was a
on.
Gallup Cobb Dak stack with no Amari, and I was just like, that guy's making you money even when he's not.
Yeah, I don't know. That guy probably is completely fine on his Amari. I guess he was probably
Yes.
really bad on it for a while, but then he had that huge hit on draft. And when are you still doing those drafts in the summers? It's something I didn't do near as many of them this summer because I just had a lot of other stuff going on. But it seems like there's got to be an edge in those, right?
The three mans are out of control, dude.
Yeah,
You should be playing $25 three mans and just going tight end, tight end.
interesting.
It's
Interesting. All right. Well, let's. So this team, I mean, I think it was a well constructed team outside of, I mean, I would never play two tight ends. This is something I don't do personally, but obviously it worked out and he's a lot richer than me now. So nice 200K score for him. TJ, I always like looking at his teams. Another guy that's just always playing, he's playing the nosebleeds. Brian Hill was interesting. So like we said, we didn't like Miles Sanders. We didn't really love Philip Lindsay. Obviously trying to get Ronald Jones in. I guess Brian Hill was the guy that was going to get volume in that range. Doesn't do anything again, but I don't think that the process was super bad on that in a live final. I think TJ had 2 seats in this. Did play Philip Lindsay as well. Played Edelman the flex, which I think was interesting. I saw this, I was like, oh, is that a late swap? And then I realized that there was no
You can't
late
swap.
swap in it. So yeah, he must have hated the running backs on this slate, I guess.
Well, I do think on this slate, looking at things holistically on a slate by slate rather than what we've done the last 4 years,
Yeah.
this might have been a slate to fade that third running back if you were playing Michael Thomas. I guess Edelman or a Godwin, like results oriented, or Evans or whatever would have been
Sure.
fine, but I don't know, man.
So he still got in. He got in his main stack. Obviously, the Baker, OBJ, Landry, bring it back with Parker, pretty reasonable there. Zach Ertz, like you said, was one of the best plays on the slate. It was just like at the tight end position, it's like 6K. It just made me uncomfortable because this is what you had to do at running back if you did something like that. So Broncos D at 32%. I heard a lot of people talking about them. They're popping on a bunch of different projection systems. All of that. I talked about this on stream. I didn't understand the Broncos play like at all. Like, can you talk like, so here, I'll show you my thought process on the Broncos and you can tell me what you were thinking with them and if you were on them or not. So they're 2,400. I understand that. They're at Buffalo. So we're just going to play a road defense, I guess, in probably one of the worst game environments on the slate. I had it projected for 55 offensive plays against a team that, like, I mean, Denver's not a pressure defense against Josh Allen. Okay. Maybe I think Josh Allen's better than most people do, but he's not like a guy that really like throws I mean, this is a black number for a reason. It means it's like middle of the pack as far as just like sacks and interceptions. So like, I didn't understand the play. I still don't understand the play. Help me.
So yeah, the biggest thing for me was why are people targeting a guy who really hasn't been very mistake prone? Yeah. It didn't make sense. And the biggest thing with defenses, guys, how often are they pressuring the quarterback? Not a lot. Move on. It's very straightforward.
The least amount of pass attempts on the slate for Josh Allen. So I guess I really don't get the play. So when I saw they were 32%, I was like, perfect. I had no interest in them.
Yep. Agreed.
Really, really weird. So anyways, like we talked about that on stream. I guess like I was hoping you could help me figure out why people play them. So I still don't really understand it. Maybe I'm missing something there. But TJ had them. A lot of high stakes guys had them. So interesting. Interesting team for him. Let's see if we had anything else here that we should go through. You have any teams, any guys you want me to look? Chess is okay. Had a bunch of seats. I think Osmo was in this thing as well. Let's look at Osmo's team. I just want to see what he did in a live final because I feel like he's not afraid to go off the board. So he had a 39th place finish, so kind of middle of the pack. A Nick Foles stack with Chark. Looks like Derrick Henry coming back on that, so don't mind that at all.
The Cooper 0.
Oh, he had Cooper at 2%. So galaxy braining that one, I guess, but God, that's brutal because I think that this was definitely a thoughtful team. Like he went pretty chalky at running back overall. He played the Broncos too. I would assume like this is one of the first times we look at the 1,500 every week. I don't think I've ever seen Osmo with a defense over 10% owned. So maybe you thought they'd be lower. Playing a wide receiver with a defense, not something I would typically do as well. Patrick ended up being 10% in this. Maybe he was just hoping he'd be lower after people were moving to the Patriots situation. 3K, like again, like that's pretty much what you had to do to play Kamara, and obviously he made a pretty big sacrifice to get in Amari. So what do you think? I think that it's it's a thoughtful team though, for sure.
Yeah, it is. And Amari was only 6'6", and I hate to say it, but if you go back and listen to the Power Hour show, I said that Dak and Amari was one of my favorite low-owned plays.
Yeah.
I clearly didn't pan out. The ownership was right, but I did like I really liked the Dallas side of that football.
You said that though before probably a lot of this stuff came out with the wind and like all that.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely. I mean, it was Friday night, but I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. All right, let's look at Papa Gates.
Look at Mr. Good Seeds.
Okay. Oh yeah, he's a Manny guy, right?
Yeah. He's a high volume player. He knows what's
Okay.
up.
So there's your Ronald Jones. That's why you wanted me to click on it. You knew he played Ronald Jones.
Did
No,
he? Yes.
there you go. You feel way sharp now, way more sharp now.
No, not at all.
So
That's such a donkey play.
Jameis at 8% though. I don't hate that in that game environment. So Jameis played Evans, so RIP there. Didn't have Godwin with Jameis.
Julio.
Had Julio. Yeah, brought it back with or he had Ronald Jones in the stack. This is pretty much like what you were like you were kind of describing, except for he played N'Keal Harry in the flex. Like everyone hated the running backs this week, apparently. Did get Michael Thomas in. Michael Thomas still ended up being 20%, which actually surprised me. I didn't think that people would prioritize that price tag for him, but good on them with in a week where running back was really odd, I guess. But another Broncos guy, so I don't know. Maybe we should ask Mr. Goodseats, like, what do we missed here? Because apparently a lot of really good players played him. So
Well, I wonder too. I wonder if they
Lindsey,
thought
I guess.
maybe they're wrong on ownership. That it's
Could
gotta
be.
be. It's
Could be.
gotta be that they misjudged ownership. Would be I guess that's where I'd
Yeah.
place my bet. But
But yeah, that's tough. I mean, getting Mike Evans at 28% and then he just does nothing. So this stack was pretty dead. Let's look at Papa Gates because those guys like when I was talking about the roster construction thing with like going 3-1, bring it back with another mini game stack. Let's see if he did that. Maybe he didn't in this. Trubisky at 1%. These guys always have these 1% guys. So Trubisky to Allen Robinson at 1%. I mean, take some stone. Like I guess you just don't have to care about money like at any point if you're playing Mr. Trubisky. But Allen Robinson, another guy in the buy low model, did pair him with Gabriel, who I thought was underpriced. Like I said, bringing back with Saquon. So like this is the type of ownership that if things break right, you just basically win, right? Like he played the chalk running back, so I don't mind that. Anytime this is a couple weeks in a row they've played Balaj actually.
So I actually kind of have a problem with if they were right on ownerships, if they went through and they said, I think Trubes will be sub 2, sub 5, sub whatever going through, I think it's wrong.
Yeah.
It's 75 people. So like
it's not a situation where you have to make that call probably.
Right. But if they did play it based off of like, well, I just think that I actually think Trubisky gets to 19 points, and I think A-Rob is definitely due for 25, and they don't care about the ownership as much, thinking like, yeah, these guys will all be sub 10, so it's icing on the cake. I just think that those ownerships, like, you don't have to do that at that many positions. I think you want those ownerships at like 3 positions,
totally agree.
7 of them.
So like small field, this is like my wheelhouse, right? So like typically what I'm going to try and do is try and do a unique correlation maybe with a cheap, like, so I played Driscoll and I think Hawkinson one week, but like the cheaper correlation with a running quarterback, something like that. But then being pretty chalky at running back. And then I'm going to take a shot at wide receiver with like a Conley, a guy that's like has a lot of like air yards, stuff like that at super low ownership. But like this is what can go wrong if you like try and go like too far off the board. Obviously if you're right and it's just a weird, like you win probably, but you still have to get a lot of these guys are that low owned because obviously there's wrinkles in them not being great plays. So I don't know. Kalen Balaj at 4%. Maybe that's just the volume. Maybe Patrick Laird. Maybe they got in his head with the Patrick Laird stuff, man.
I don't care, dude. You could project, Balaj for 22 touches at whatever 2.5 yards a carry or something like that. Like it's still to me just like, and where you really think there's touchdown equity with Miami? It's so brutal, dude.
He played him in both of his teams. So the other team, you had Tom Brady, 2%, Edelman, who we played on both, but brought it back with Amari, OBJ, Kamara. So pretty chalky there. SOA did have a James White in that main stack. Also Ben Watson. So pretty big game stack on this one. Another Broncos D person. Again, I guess I'm missing something. If anyone's watching this on YouTube, let me know in the comments how dumb I was for not playing Broncos D and getting those 4 points, getting 1 sack. Like this is not how my defense is usually. Like even if they run bad, like I very rarely get 1 sack from a defense because this is not really how I play. Interesting. Papa Gate. Like I mean. He went for it all, so you can respect that for sure. Let's see who else we got here, and then we'll. Chess is okay. I think he had 3 seats, so let's look at his outside. We looked at Nev's obviously, but let's see what someone else did with multiple seats. So he had 3 seats. He had a team that was in. Let's look at his best team. So Fitzpatrick stack with Parker and Hearns. I actually don't hate the Hearns thing. Like 3,300 where you're pivoting off some of the other chalky guys there. I mean, he's full-time
and half
player.
The ownership from
half
Parker
the ownership.
too.
Yeah. So he was basically the same ownership as like Patrick, something like that. So that was his main stack there. Didn't have anyone coming back. It looks like, he had Chubb. So I don't hate the idea of doing this. This is something that actually back on our playoff stream, our famous playoff show with you and Proctor, where we all moved off, kind of the chalky stack to the Pittsburgh side of things, but we also played Fournette on that too. So we basically moved everything to Antonio Brown and Fournette. I think that's what we did, right? So like the game script of like having all the Pittsburgh guys, but then also having like the running back on the other side if it does go nuts. So if Chubb gets there, like obviously he scored, like this is what you're gonna. I mean, he had 3 catches. I thought that Chubb was going to bury me because I was not playing this guy. As soon as he got his third
3 catches in like the first
right away
5 minutes.
Yeah. So like that was the one I was like tilting very early in this game. That was like before OBJ and Landry got there. So 8,100 for Chubb just seemed too expensive for a guy that like was going to have his entire passing game role, I thought, taken from Hunt. But I like what he did with roster construction here with Fitzpatrick, Hearns, Devontae Parker, bringing it back with Chubbs on the other side. If for some reason, or I guess that was kind of what most people expected, was Cleveland to play well, Fitzpatrick and good guys. So I like that. Play Christian McCaffrey, like that. Again, I like Goddard quite a bit at tight end just for he ended up being 26% in this. Demaryius Thomas, again, like a cheap guy that was seeing volume. Like I guess he was at least, I mean, if you're looking at the projections, he was at least in play.
Dude, all of those receivers are all the same. Just because the only reason that 2 or 3 stand out is because that's who everyone decides to talk about on the Twitter sphere, man. And that's all that it is.
Demaryius had a touchdown call back in this too. So if you luck into this guy that gets like his 3 or 4 catches and he gets a touchdown like Yahtzee at 3,600 or whatever he is. So I mean, he probably deserved a little better here. Jacksonville defense, I actually like Jacksonville quite a bit. They were a team that was pressuring, like Tannehill will take sacks. 2% for Jacksonville, I think, is reasonable. Their price was they were 2,800, so kind of around the same range as like New Orleans. So interesting there. So his next team, he had Matt Ryan, Calvin. So no Julio with Matt Ryan, which was somewhat unique. We got another Ronald Jones Galaxy brainer here for you, 5%. But again, like the game script side of it. So I think he was very thoughtful in his roster construction. I think Chess is a very good player, by the way.
So do I.
So Goddard again. So he must have really liked Goddard at tight end. So that he decided to kind of take his stand there. He did play Julio, actually. Sorry, he just had him in the flex. And Calvin Ridley. So decent game stack, low owned defense. One kind of very kind of big stand, I guess, when we just didn't like these running backs. I like this team, man. It didn't quite get there. Guys, 35th. But and then the Russ team. All the Russ teams are really low in this. They just didn't finish very well, obviously, with him only getting 11 points. But Kamara, Sanders, there's a Josh Gordon play. So you must be sharp, man. Chess is all over your place. Ryan Griffin at tight end, 8%. Falcon. All of his defenses are very low owned. So I love that. He basically played a lot of chalk running backs here. This is more what I think ownership should look like. Would you agree? Like maybe like a correlation
50,
play like this.
30.
Yeah.
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
his main stack is very
4.
low owned. He has the running backs, like maybe a lower owned tight end, like 1%. Like props to Chess. I know that he didn't like obviously have a big score in this thing, but I think that all 3 of his teams make a lot of sense. He has like very little overlap too. So if you want to learn more about how to be a profitable DFS player and get better at betting, start now by hitting the subscribe icon in the bottom right-hand corner so you don't miss anything. Check out these videos right here, but if you want to hang out with us live tomorrow for my first look in Week 13, twitch.tv/Joe Holka. We see you at 3 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow.